Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to MTGO Traders. My name is Taryn and let's talk about Rakdos Burn. So I'm trying something new on today's video. It's just a deck tech, that's it. No matches, no leagues, just a deck tech. Will there be leagues and gameplay on the channel? Absolutely. I just want to have the option to talk about decks that I can't fit into a single week. This is for people who just want the deck tech so they can go and brew the idea into matches themselves. Let's call these videos Deck Delve. This way I can bring more content to you, more content to the channel, and not spend hours playing matches on each of these decks. Trust me, they're fun, I promise. Okay, now that that's out of the way, welcome to MTGO Traders. If you're new here, we talk Magic the Gathering deck builds, run gameplay, and rant about whatever is annoying us. And of course, talk about things that excite us in the world of Magic the Gathering, sponsored by, you guessed it, MTGO Traders and Cape Fear Games. So if that sounds fun to you, make sure to like the video and subscribe. There's always a ton of content coming out here every single weekday. Today's deck tech is Rakdos Burn, an aggressive deck that doesn't hinge on creatures, but spells that slowly but surely whittle your opponent's life total down to 0. The creatures in the deck list help in that regard, but they're not the primary win condition. So let's break down the list. Starting with creatures, we have 12 in total: 4 Fanatical Firebrand, 4 Electrostatic Field, and 4 Viashino Pyromancer. All 3 of these creatures do indirect burn, offering blocks in the field, and in the case of Electrostatic Field, have a fantastic ability to trigger every time we cast an instant or sorcery speed spell. Fanatical Firebrand does 1 point of damage, and you'll want to activate this for either ending a game or when you block a creature. Then of course sack this in response to the block to do the damage to your opponent, or get rid of a land or elf or other creatures that are threatening the game in the early game that only have 1 toughness. Pyromancer is a bit different though. It's a one and done ability, so trading with it is only useful after it comes into play. A player targeted shock with legs, but still that's 10% of your opponent's life total and we'll take it. Not only that, but it comes in on turn 2. So if we're on the play, having this in our hand to come in usually means we're getting a few cracks at our opponent's life total for the trouble. Same thing with of course the Firebrand on turn 1. Electrostatic Field here is the only odd man out, but still does a ton of damage for us and offers a substantial wall defense against our life total. The only downside these days in Standard is Lava Coil in red, Cast Down in black, and Baffling End in white. However, most opponents will let this creature linger on the battlefield much longer than you think, since it does nothing until you do something. Next up we have spells, 24 in total, and I'll break these down into 2 categories: direct damage and decision damage, meaning our opponent has to choose to take damage so that we don't receive extra value. First up, direct damage. We've got your usual suspects with Shock, Lightning Strike, and Wizard's Lightning. All 3 do direct damage to any target, but mostly an opponent's face will do just fine. Next up we have Sovereign's Bite, and I love this card since it deals the same amount of damage as Lightning Strike, but gives us the added bump of gaining 3 life as well. And in a tempo matchup, this is incredibly important. It goes a long way and extends our deck reach to last a few more turns than it otherwise could. Moving on to decision-based damage, we have Sword Point, Diplomacy, and Risk Factor. I really enjoy both of these cards, but Risk Factor is possibly the best spell in the deck, giving us either insane value or our opponent takes a 1/5 of their life total in damage. And by turn 3 or 4, Risk Factor is just a 3-mana draw spell for us, giving us even more options for drawing into more burn spells. Not only that, but Risk Factor also has a new ability called Jumpstart, meaning you'll be able to cast this twice for the cost of 3 mana and discarding a card. This is what makes Risk Factor good. Instead of dealing 4 damage or 3 cards, it's 8 damage in 6 cards. Ridiculous. Sword Point Diplomacy is another interesting ability here for us, and something that I only have 2 of in here. My issue is, if the Diplomacy had just a discard outlet and not exiled, I'd love it. But if we draw into a Risk Factor, you know an opponent is just going to make us exile it. And since it's exiled, we don't get that Jumpstart. A bummer to be sure. But more often than not, this card will burn an opponent for 3 to 6 points of damage and we'll get a land for the trouble. Not amazing, but not terrible by any means. Much slower than Risk Factor at being sorcery speed of course, so this might be the first card to take out when playing against control. The last spell in this deck list is a 2 of Lava Coil. I appreciate this card for its simplicity and impact on the current meta. Dealing 4 damage to something is no joke, and exiling the card if it dies is icing on this already sweet cake. The only downside is the sorcery speed action of this card, making removal against control or blue decks in general a bit tricky, but it removes Tempest Gen and mono blue tempo, and that's all I care about. Lastly, we have a very special enchantment from Guilds of Ravnica, Experimental Frenzy. Now, I ran this and Flame of Keld to see which one is better, and this card in the mid to late game was an absolute monster. If you have mana, you just play the top of your deck forever until your opponent is dead. This card is amazing, and gives your deck the reach to close out a match or when you're out of cards by turn 4. Frenzy not only fills up the possibility of drawing gas, but fills up your graveyard for when you draw into Risk Factor, making a repeating Risk Factor even better. And if your opponent does just give you the cards, sack the Frenzy and start hurling fireballs at their face until GG. Seriously, this card has gotten me out of more jams than I could count. Finally, we have the land base. It's a fairly basic smattering of staples and one interesting land here for hexproof removal. A 1 of Detection Tower is here to keep Mono Green Stompy and Carnage Tyrant specifically in check. You'd be surprised how frequently you get double slapped by a Carnage Tyrant and just be unable to move on. Detection Tower makes hexproof creatures able to be targeted, so a Shock and Lava Coil should handle a Tyrant in no time. Other than that, getting a blood crit from the next Ravnica set is sure to spice up this deck list, but for now the number of lands tilts more towards mountains, as everything but Sovereign Bite and Sword Point Diplomacy needs red mana. That changes of course once we hit the sideboard though. Speaking of, we've got a lot of great meta killers for you in the sideboard that I'm sure you'll enjoy. Keep in mind a sideboard should be based on the decks you run into at your local meta or online, so this is just a basic sideboard that I had fun with. It's not an exact science, but I did some of the heavy lifting so you wouldn't have to. We've got several cards for the control matchup, like Banefire, Duress, and Demanding Dragon. All three of these cards squeeze control in one way or another, forcing an opponent to surrender up cards from their hand on turn 1, a creature if they can't counter Demanding Dragon, and if they let the match get into the late game, we just burn them to the ground with Banefire. Keep in mind, Banefire is uncounterable if we pay up to 6 mana. That's 5 points of uncounterable damage, usually enough to close out a match. To deal with tokens and go wide strategies, we have Fiery Cannonade, Goblin Chainwhirler, and Ritual of Soot. Cannonade and Ritual being in the sideboard together is for 2 different deck lists. Cannonade isn't as effective against mono blue tempo and of course Pirates decks, but Ritual of Soot is. And Ritual of Soot isn't really great against Night decks due to tempo and speed, but Cannonade is. Not only that, but Chainwhirler does wonders against Selesnya tokens as well. Also, being a 3/3 first striker isn't bad either, as that can basically eat any creature in the format that isn't Lyra Dawnbringer. The last card of the sideboard here is more Lava Coil for the more mid-range matchups like Golgari midrange or Arclight Phoenix, as Lava Coil has the fantastic ability to exile things it kills. And also, since the Is It Drake list is full of 4 toughness Drakes and a Phoenix that's hard to destroy, more Lava Coils are a must. But that is the deck list. If you're looking to build this for Magic Online, the price is coming to about 15 tickets from MTGO Traders. That's an absolute steal. But it's also not terrible at right around $100 in paper Magic as well. Better still, this deck has 0 mythics, so if you're an arena player, it should be an easy enough deck to build if you have enough wildcards. And since most arena players really start in red, pitching into this burn list should be pretty easy. But that wraps it up for the deck tech. I hope you liked it. If you did, I'd appreciate a like on the video, share on your social media platform of choice, and if you love the video, subscribe for more content from MTGO Traders. All these things help to keep the lights on here, and we greatly appreciate that. Also, comment below on what deck I should cover next, and if you want me to run your deck through some matches and give advice on it for Fan Friday, I take those submissions on Discord and Facebook groups. Links are in the description. As always, these videos are brought to you by MTGO Traders and Cape Fear Games. Get your Magic Online singles from MTGO Traders, and get your paper singles and accessories from Cape Fear Games, like these sweet +1/+1 dice that they just came up with. I love these things. Anyway, if you're into talking to me directly, I'm on Twitch, Twitter, and of course right here in the comments every single day, replying back as often as I can. I love you guys in this community, and until next time, have a good one. Peace.